Okay, so this is what the police could actually be doing, part two. No one is watching these videos because I have no views. And essentially, that is the most underground, most niche, most insular community you can have when the only viewer of your videos is you. Pinkies up, everyone. Very sophisticated. But regardless, this is what the police actually could be doing. Right? I notice there's a lot of 311 calls being abused, mental health calls. So even when, maybe the Toronto Police Board or the Toronto Police Association, maybe when they tell these people, oh, we need more money because we need officers responding to call. We don't need all these 911 calls when we really need 311 calls. We need people to abuse 311 calls so they can harass the public. Right? This is what's actually happening. And when they send some fucking social worker or like some crisis worker to your door, unfortunately, the police are going to show up at your door anyways. They're gonna still show up at your door. And what happened was, I was put onto a psych ward, and they put me on Abilify. So now I got to contend with. I have to contend with brain fog and being slowed down, maybe gambling addictions. Maybe I develop, some sort of impulsive thing that I can't stop, like being overly sexual. I doubt it. But, that's what it comes with this medication, actually. On the Canadian government's website, they said that it was Abilify was a medication that shouldn't be prescribed because there were several lawsuits in Florida, in the United States, where a Supreme Court judge was saying, "Hey, look, people are developing severe gambling addictions, severe impulse control, brain fog, and tardive dyskinesia. That doesn't seem healthy. So, what does this have to do with policing?" Well, I think again there could that word overlap. There could be some overlap between street drugs and prescribed medications on psych wards, right? Like, you ever ask yourself, like, why are the fucking crackheads and the schizophrenic people just so fucking out of control lately? Like, they just fucking just lose their fucking minds. I think that's a good question. I think some of these schizophrenic people have an overlap with methamphetamine or fentanyl, and they're being prescribed these like fucking antipsychotic medication that should never have been prescribed. Uh, the thing is, a lot of this antipsychotic medication is supposed to ensure that there's dopamine blockers, right? But if for whatever reason these dopamine blockers, these molecules in people's brains, if they were to change their, molecular structure and break off into other proteins or whatever, or whatever kind of receptor blocker, it could go from, I mean, I don't know, I'm not a doctor, but, could it be possible that these dopamine blockers become serotonin blockers, right? These molecules break off into smaller parts and then they start blocking serotonin inhibitors. Right, you have a dopamine inhibitor and you have a serotonin inhibitor, and if you have a severe mental illness that you need serotonin inhibition, then you should be prescribed that with some serious caution. But if not, there's also mental consequences for that, right? Once you start blocking serotonin, you're doing some really nasty stuff to people's fucking brains. And that's why there was a huge Florida lawsuit. And on the Canadian government's website, they're saying not to prescribe this shit. So what does this have to do with policing? I mean, maybe on the Toronto Police Association or the Toronto Police Services Board, maybe you should, advocate to stop this medication, because if there's overlap with street drugs and people are having fucking impulse controls, well, not only are you going to see shoplifting and break-ins and robberies, you're going to see all kinds of crime, right? Any crime, regardless if it's violent crime or not. Like, why the fuck do these junkies Like, instead of getting a regular job, like, why the fuck do they just, like, say, like, oh, we have to do a robbery to get some crack or some fentanyl or some whatever fucking kind of drug? Like, the crackheads today in Toronto are fucking ridiculous, right? There's some serious impulse control problems going on. So I think, maybe if you solve that issue, because again, in another video, I said that forensic psychologist overprescribed me Seroquel or quetiapine by 1,500 milligrams. And technically, you should not prescribe over 500. And I've heard people taking 50 milligram tablets and just completely passing out and going to sleep, right? So they may have changed my brain chemistry forever. Forever. So they need to consider, like, maybe the Toronto Police Services Board, if you don't want to ask for so much money, or maybe you do, most likely you do, but if you don't want to ask for so much money and always complain about how your shitty police service is not working, why don't you actually solve crime by making sure there isn't an overlap of medications and street drugs, medications such as Abilify, right? Maybe that's what you could do. Maybe you'd solve a lot more crimes, because then a lot of these drug abuse patients wouldn't have to deal with these fucking mental issues. Fuck.